How's it going, guys? I hope you had a good holiday weekend. If you're not in the United States and you didn't have some holiday where you had an excuse to gain weight just because, I hope you had a good week too, but it probably wasn't as good as ours was. I wanted to take a minute to talk about coatings that you can have for DIY tanks, because there's not a whole lot of knowledge of what's out there, what the categories are, what kinds of things you should really be looking at. One of the things that comes up all the time, you ask the question and everybody in the world just goes, hey, Pond Shield, I used it, it's great. And Pond Shield is fine, but it's not great for everything. And we need to look at some of the alternatives to that. We need to look at, the categories that these things are in. Just very briefly, so that you'll know what applies to Pond Shield. If we look at the SDS of this product, they are very secretive about what they're selling you. They have, proprietary component A, B, and C. They don't tell you what the safety information is. They just say trade secret. So I spent about 20 hours digging through safety sheets and material data information on a whole bunch of chemicals that are common for epoxies, so that I could figure out what this actually is based on the information that they do give you, which is the toxicity levels for a couple of aquatic animals. And what I can say with certainty is that proprietary component A is benzyl alcohol and proprietary component B is isophorone-diamine. And that is the hardener used in cycloaliphatic epoxy. So when I talk about cycloaliphatic epoxy, that applies to Pond Shield. That is what it is. It's not special, it's just that. So it's the same kind of thing as Rust-Oleum 6500 series, it's the same kind of thing as Corotech V430. These should all be interchangeable epoxies. Now, Pond Shield is $190 a gallon, and Corotech V430 is $180 for 3 gallons. So there's a big price difference there. But Corotech will not cover the epoxy if you use it underwater. They tell you not to. They say, this is a bad idea. We sell stuff that works for this. Use that stuff, you idiot. There are some others on the market, but it is... That's what it is. So instead of covering this as an individual product like a lot of people do, it's in that. It's in the 100% solids epoxies that you use to cover your garage floor. That's the category that this is. The other categories are polyamide, which is what I generally use, phenalkylamine, amidoamine, and then there's some others that I'm not going to concern myself with in the video because they really don't work for anything that we're doing. It's worth knowing that these kinds of things are out there, that there are differences in this, because it's easy to screw this up. The first plywood tank that I made was for my water dragon. It was 7 feet long, half of it was an aquarium, ended up being like 120 gallons, something like that. And, I grew up doing fiberglass, I grew up doing the cloth airplanes and stuff with my dad, following around the Civil Air Patrol, things like that. So I'm familiar with working with resins. And every time that we had done this, we're using airplane epoxy or fiberglass resin. That's what we're doing. So the idea that there's all of these different things, I knew 5-minute epoxies weren't the same. I knew that they don't get as rigid, and I just sort of thought that meant they were worse. So I go down and I buy myself some fiberglass resin, because that's the only thing they have in any containers larger than this. The 5-minute epoxies won't work, and even if they did work, you're looking at like $1,000 to coat a 100-gallon tank. So I buy myself some fiberglass resin, and I go ahead and I seal up the tank. It's got a nice amber hue to it. I like it a lot. It's completely waterproof. So I seal it up, and I put it in my windows, and I give everything time to cure, and I fill the thing up, and the sides bow. So, I as soon as I notice this, I go ahead and I drain the tank down. I put in some top supports just to keep it a little bit more rigid. I go ahead and fill the thing back up. Everything's great. 3 months later, there's dark spots in the back because the bowed sides had created micro fractures in the actual wood. Not the wood, the resin. And so water was leaking through. So I ended up having to drain the tank, move all of the fish that were in there out of it, redo it, try to keep the lizards from going into the water, which is not good because that's the only place they use the bathroom. You know, is a big hairy mess because I wasn't aware of these differences at the time. So that kind of stuff, flat out, it's garbage. It's not usable for what we're doing. And a lot of people, you know, they just don't know that you can go someplace else. I didn't think of it. It never occurred to me to go to a paint store to buy epoxy at the time. So that was all I had. That was what I used, and it was trash. So if you go to a paint store, you know, you go down to someplace like Sherwin-Williams, Benjamin Moore, someplace like this, they're going to have products available that will work for what you want. Sherwin-Williams makes a nice little... I can't think of the word right now. Spreadsheet sort of thing. It's called the Epoxy Coating Guide. And the Epoxy Coating Guide ranks different epoxies based on various traits. So they've got, you know, water resistance, acid resistance, solvent resistance, how well it's ranked for adhesion, film flexibility, blushing resistance, color stability, whether you can put it on in a low temperature application, whether it's resistant to corrosive materials, what the viscosity is like. These are things that matter depending on the job. You know, if you're going to do a wooden tank, you want high flexibility more than you necessarily want a tough surface. And if you're doing a concrete tank, flexibility doesn't matter at all. Like, functionally you don't want flexibility because as the concrete ages, you might have some pieces on the inside that kind of crack a little bit, and you don't want that screwing up the surface. You want something that's going to hold your concrete together. So because I do wooden tanks, because I'm working on this big 2,300 gallon tank right now, I'm going to, you know, hopefully throw up a 3D picture of it here. This is going to be something that I'm doing out of wood. It's not going to be like the thing that Joey just did that's this massive concrete monstrosity that he had to basically mortgage his house to cover. I'm trying to do something for under $1,000, and that means it's going to be out of wood. So I'm going to be making this thing, and I've been looking into the various options that are available because it's going to be in the winter. I can't use the Corotech V430 that I normally use. The fumes are too strong. I just can't do it without ventilation. Coincidentally, a couple of people have started asking questions about this in the comments of the other video. So, you know, this is kind of a dual function. I've been looking into it. I have all this knowledge. I've been talking to manufacturers already, so I might as well share the information with you. It's a good time to do it, I think. So for my concerns, because I'm making a wooden box, obviously water resistance is number one. And water resistance rankings functionally are polyamide, phenalkylamine, amidoamine, and cycloaliphatic. Now, cycloaliphatic being fourth doesn't mean that it's terrible. It just means that it's not as good as the other ones. It is still ranked pretty highly. If you look up a cycloaliphatic epoxy, the thing that they say about it is, you know, it's got such better water resistance than the aliphatic epoxies. So it's ranked up there. It's just not the best. Film flexibility. I want something that is going to be flexible. Polyamide is the top rank. Again, it's polyamide, amidoamine, phenalkylamine, and cycloaliphatic. Get a little bit tongue-tied when I say these things. Adhesion. Wood is a smooth surface. The better it sticks, the better off I am. Polyamide, again, top on that. Phenalkylamine, amidoamine, cycloaliphatic. I'm going to be doing this either black, sandstone, or clear coat. I haven't decided yet. So if I'm doing a clear coat, polyamide is really the only choice. Everything else is going to yellow. You can buy clear cycloaliphatics. Corotech V430 comes in clear. I don't know if Pond Shield does. Color stability doesn't really matter in this job. Sometimes it does. You know, one of the tanks that I haven't finished up the outside yet, but the inside is this green color. I'm going to do a brown on the outside. You know, I tried to do kind of a tarnished bronze. I've got some reflective bronze in there. Mostly it just looks like there's algae on the walls all the time, which is kind of gross. But, you know, if you're going to do a color, getting this color mix cost me, I think, $80 in pigment. If you're going to spend the money on pigment, you want it to retain color. So that's a concern. And the last thing that you really want to think about is viscosity. And the question is, how comfortable are you with these kinds of materials? Because a lower viscosity epoxy is going to be easy to do. It's going to be, you know, the one that I used is on their sheet the lowest ranked because it's the lowest viscosity. So it's like painting on latex paint. You know, you put too much, it gets runny, it doesn't really auto-level. You have to do multiple coats because you cannot do it thick without it ending up with streaks and runs and gross things that you end up having to sand down. And it really doesn't sand well until it's like 14 days old. A high viscosity epoxy, the cycloaliphatic like Pond Shield, Corotech V430, these kinds of things are like molasses. So, you know, you can push them around and leave a very thick layer that is going to sort of self-level. For my uses, generally polyamide is the best. It's the top rated for everything that I care about. The only downsides to it really are, it takes a long time to cure. You're looking at a 7-day cure time. It stinks. It's not high volatile organic compounds. You'll see that term on a lot of these sheets, VOC. It's considered a low VOC epoxy, which means that it's not really super dangerous to have around. You know, I use the Corotech V430. That, I have to ventilate the house to make it safe, but it wouldn't kill me to use it inside without it. I would just get dizzy, I'd get lightheaded, I might pass out, but it's not going to cause any real long-term damage. Safety-wise, I'm kind of limited. I have Tourette's, so I'm hypersensitive to a lot of weird stimuli. It makes it act up. You probably see in some of the videos that I've got some weird facial grimaces and stuff that happen. I try to edit those out. You know, it's there. So if I wear a face mask, it acts up, I can't do anything. I start having, like, whole-body twitches and convulsions, and I start, like, grunting and barking and cursing and things like that. So I'm a little bit limited in what I can use. And polyamides are not dangerous, but they are kind of gross. And that's not universal. There is AES 450, Nova Tough 450. These are both 100% solid polyamides that have basically no odor. These are safe to use inside. Edison Coatings provides Epoxy 250 HD, which is about an 80% solid. They say it's fine to use inside in an enclosed space. You're not going to have issues with danger. Sherwin-Williams makes Macro Epoxy, which is a lower odor epoxy than the Corotech that I usually use. They even have a specifically extra low volatile potable water certified version of this, but they usually won't have it in the store. They'll have to special order it. So these are things that fall in the category that are okay for me. Normally these things run about $65 a gallon. The lower odor ones are more expensive. So when you're looking at something like Epoxy 250 HD, which is an exceptionally good product, and you can even apply it underwater, that's a product that you have to buy 3 gallons of it. It's $328 for the 3-gallon kit. And that's not bad, but I only need about 1.4 gallons if I'm looking at 100% solid. You know, obviously if you're looking at a lower solid content, you need to get more. And the way that that works is when they say 100% solid, that means there's no shrinkage. If it's 60% solid, that you're going to have 40% shrinkage as it dries. So I don't need 3 gallons. Nova Tough is, you can get in a 2-gallon kit. I believe The 2-gallon kit runs $282 if you look around for it. I think it's normally $320, so it's a little bit more expensive. You know, it's about $140 a gallon. But that's still more than I really want to spend. There's a lot of other alternatives that I haven't heard back from companies about yet. For the price, you know, it's not bad. Compared to the $190 a gallon that Pond Shield wants, it's really not bad at all. Pond Shield's pricing is a little weird. The 3-gallon kit is $627 is what they recommend, which works out to quite a bit more than $190 a gallon. I'm not sure why it gets more expensive as the price goes up. I haven't really looked into it. Maybe they have shipping discounts to compensate. I don't know. So polyamide, it's great in everything except viscosity, except in the cases of things like Nova Tough, Aquapoxy, things like that are very viscous. But as a general rule, it's latex paint consistency. You're going to have to do 3 coats. Has a long working life. You know, 3 to 6 hours working life after you mix it up before it gets ruined. That's good to me. It's bad to some people. 7-day cure time. It's not a big deal to me. I don't really care. 7 days doesn't matter because I only have to wait about 4 days before I put the windows in, and then I'm going to give those 3 days to cure anyway. So, you know, it adds 2 days to my project functionally. But for some people that matters. The next thing that we want to think about is phenalkylamines, and these are, you know, when I get the comment on my video where people go, epoxies are horrifically dangerous, you need to be using all sorts of protection, wear protective gear, wear a breather. Phenalkylamines are the kinds of things that people are thinking of. These are highly, highly volatile substances. You need a breather for this. You need protective gear, you know, gloves that go up to your elbows, a couple layers of shirts, maybe a face mask to make sure it doesn't touch you. You know, they're not like acids, but they've got some nasty stuff in them. And the reason they've got some nasty stuff in them is so that they can cure down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which is quite a bit below freezing. This is an impressive thing. So, you know, if you live someplace where midwinter you want to do something like this, you've got a shed in the back, there's not an issue with letting it sit there for a while, you can go out, you can apply a phenalkylamine epoxy and give it 30 days. As long as it's above 0 degrees Fahrenheit, it'll cure in 30 days. As the temperature goes up, it shortens. You know, room temperature, it's 7 days, just like the polyamide. So warmer temperatures are good, but you have the option of doing cold weather stuff with this, as long as you can put it someplace dry. Phenalkylamines are second rated in pretty much everything except flexibility, I think. So they're still better than like cycloaliphatic at basically everything. They're a little bit less runny than polyamides. They're especially going to be less runny if you're doing it in the cold. The colder this stuff is, the firmer it gets. So if you're out there doing this, you know, midwinter, this stuff may still be kind of like tar when you spread it, but it'll be spreadable, whereas these other things will be so thick that you can't even work with them. They've got most of the same benefits as the polyamides. They're a lot more dangerous to use, so I don't use them personally. I'm pretty sure you use those in an unventilated area, it will hospitalize you. Those usually run, they're a 1-to-4 mixture. You know, a polyamide is a 1-to-1 mixture, so when I say it's $60 a gallon, you have to buy 2. Minimum you're looking at, it's $120. Phenalkylamines are a 1-to-4, and they're usually about $110 for a 1-gallon kit. It's really 1 1/4 gallon. So it's not a whole lot more money. I would end up having to buy 2 of the kits to do what I need, and I don't want to use the epoxy, so it doesn't matter. Amidoamines are something that are kind of hard to find in small quantities. I'm pretty sure that Sureplate PW is one of these, and it looks like an exceptionally good product. You know, it's got a quick cure time, it's very low volatile solvent, it's pretty flexible, it sticks pretty well, it does only come in white and blue, which is not great, but it's not the end of the world. And these ones tend to be for, large industrial tanks and things, so they tend to be priced for this. So if you want to buy like Sureplate PW, it comes in 5-gallon jars, and it's a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm not going to spend $1,600 on 10 gallons of stuff. As a business owner, I get a huge discount. It's not $160 a gallon for me, it's $80 a gallon for me, but I don't need 10 gallons of the stuff. A lot of these things, they only come in 50-gallon drums. I don't really know a whole lot about them other than that. Other than the fact that they're massive things. They tend to be pretty safe, but you're looking at thousands of dollars to buy it. The last thing that I want to cover for epoxies are the cycloaliphatic, and these are the category that Pond Shield is in. And I'm really disappointed at how hard it was to figure out what Pond Shield is. I get that they don't want people to know this because they don't want people to knee-jerk go, wait, there's other stuff that's better. Why are you selling this? It's something that has a lot of people using it. A lot of people say this is okay, but it's not really any different than anything else. At $190 a gallon versus 180 gallons or $180 for 3 gallons of Corotech V430, I'm not going to buy it. And the science behind how this works, the isophorondiamine is what makes it a cycloaliphatic epoxy. That's the central thing of what it is. That's what creates the rings that allows it to have some flexibility but to be more rigid than the long fatty chains and the polyamides. So there's not really a functional difference between this and the cheaper products that are $60 a gallon. It's not a special product. They want desperately to sell it as a special product, but it's all just marketing something in the same way that an Air Jordan shoe is not special. It's not worth $300 unless you just really care about it. Now, long term, the fact that this is a more expensive product doesn't really matter. If you factor this in over the 20-year lifespan of your tank, paying $190 a gallon versus paying $60 a gallon it doesn't matter. I don't approve of the product because I feel that they are being dishonest. Benzyl alcohol and isophorondiamine are not non-toxic. This product, before it has cured, is not non-toxic. They make the claim that it is, and it 100% is not. They're just lying to you. Based only on that, I'm going to say you shouldn't use this, and if you want to use a cycloaliphatic epoxy, you should get something else. If you call up Corotech and you say, hey, can I use this underwater? They're going to go, oh, don't do that. No, we make epoxies for water use. Don't use this one. And the reason is, long-term, cycloaliphatic epoxies don't hold up real well. So you're going to get 20-25 year life out of this, probably. If you've got really acidic water or really basic water, you might only get 10. But for the average person, that's not going to matter. 25 years from now, Joey's new tank that he built is going to start leaking, but he's not going to notice because the concrete's going to hold the water in. It's a big solid concrete block. The thing's not going to fall apart for 50 years. Even if he didn't coat it, he's still going to get basically the same lifespan. He's going to get the 25 years. So it's 25 years, the epoxy is going to get destroyed, he's going to get another 25, it's going to start peeling off the edges, but he's not going to care enough to fix it at that point because it's not going to leak. So, it doesn't matter. But I'm building a big wooden box. So, if in 20 years my big wooden box starts leaking, it's going to start rotting the wood. That's a problem. I don't have the advantage of having the concrete undertone. The other downside to a cycloaliphatic is it really doesn't have great adhesion, so it's going to stick really well to concrete because concrete is porous. Even after you put on your primer to seal it up, you do your acid wash to get rid of the excess calcium to make sure there's no powder, you put on your primer, you throw on your epoxy, it's going to grip in really well. Even if you put it straight on the concrete, it's going to grip in really well. But if you do a smooth surface, like a steel or a wood, they recommend that you use a primer first because these surfaces just don't have enough porosity to really stick well. Cycloaliphatic epoxies are a lot more flexible than some, but they're not nearly as flexible as a polyamide. That's something to consider. You know, and if you're doing a concrete tank, you want something rigid, you want something that's going to stick in really well. So a cycloaliphatic for concrete is a great option, because again, if it springs a leak, you're probably not going to live long enough to notice. Now, that's not good for aquariums or things like that. If you've got a big business that is using huge ponds, you know, SeaWorld needs to plan longer than 50 years. So it's not a good solution for them. But for you and I, it's fine. The only question is whether you want to spend the extra money for the brand name or whether you want to save money by going with something like Rust-Oleum 6500 or Corotech V430. Benefits of cycloaliphatic: it is very thick. If you're somebody that's in a hurry and you want to put it on in one coat and you don't want to muck about with multiple things, any cycloaliphatic is going to be very thick. They're all going to be basically 90 to 100% solids. They are very low odor, so you can use basically all of them inside. It doesn't matter. They are all very tough. They go on one coat, you're going to get yourself a 12 to 15 mil coating. It's going to be very hard for you to break this through, but they're not super flexible. So if you have a tank that's going to flex, you're probably going to end up either with it cracking or with it detaching and delaminating off of your wood. So that's something that you want to take into consideration. If you're going to use it for a wooden tank, you want to make sure that you have a very, very rigid structure and that it's not going to move at all. A little bit of flex is okay. Much at all, I wouldn't trust. I would go with something more flexible, like a 100% polyamide. 100% solids polyamide, I'm sorry. That's really all of the options that are worth considering. Stuff like fiberglass epoxy, just don't do it. It's going to cause you problems. Don't do it. Polyester resins, don't do it. They're not waterproof. They're going to yellow, they're going to slough off, they're going to turn milky white and dissolve into your water, and it's just gross. There are some rubber coatings, like Permadry's Pond Coat, and these work really well. You can get a really thick, solid layer with these, but silicone doesn't stick to it at all. So you can't really silicone a window in, and if you're going to do something like an acrylic window, you're already running a problem of the silicone not sticking real well to the acrylic. As I showed in my silicone and acrylic video, most of them don't stick to acrylic at all, and if you then try to sandwich it against something else that it won't stick to at all, then you're better off just getting a big rubber gasket and greasing it and slapping it on there and bolting the window on. And that's always an option. You know, when you look at the big tank that Joey made, he bolted the windows, he bolted the windows in, and that's something you can do in a smaller tank. You don't have to have an enormous tank to do that. As long as the bolts are coated really well with something so they're not going to rust and it's not going to get into your water, then going and getting a custom-made gasket the size you want isn't terribly expensive. Getting a gasket kit and putting the rubber in with that yourself is not terribly expensive. You can probably get away with something like Lexel. Lexel, if you're not familiar with it, is this crystal clear rubber solvent, or not solvent, silicone replacement. It's caulk, basically. DAP also makes one. These are the American products. If you're overseas, I have no idea what the equivalent would be. Lexel is safe to use in an aquarium. They'll tell you not to, just like the GE stuff tells you not to. They'll tell you not to use it underwater, just like the GE stuff tells you not to use it underwater. But it's safe to use. There are a couple manufacturers of pond equipment that specifically say, you should use this because you're using a rubber sheet for your pond and it's going to stick to the rubber way better than silicone does. Lexel says don't use it on rubber, but I think that's because the solvents in the Lexel will dissolve the rubber a little bit and it'll ruin the surface, and not because it won't stick, because I've played with it and it sticks to everything. One of the other workarounds that they've come up with on like the Monster Fish forums, there's a lot of really good information there if you're looking at this, is if you do a little bit of epoxy on your surface and then you silicone your window in and then you do your rubber coating up and over the silicone and over the window, you'll end up with a solid sheet. It'll usually stick to your acrylic or your glass better than it'll stick to the silicone, so you can end up with a solid layer of water sealant on the inside that way. And that's an option that you can do, and it's not that hard to do. The other rubber that people use a lot, there's a big 5-gallon jug of blue stuff, and I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but from what I've read on that, it gets kind of splotchy. So even if you're okay with the blue color, it's not going to be a consistent blue. So people end up having to do, big full tank backgrounds or things like that to cover it up because they don't like it. So the perma-dry pond coat is a good idea. A lot of the other ones aren't. Dry Lock is a latex paint that people use for water sealing concrete. I also wouldn't use that because while it sticks really well to concrete, it doesn't stick really well to anything else, and you're only going to get about 6 years out of it. It will work. If you can find a sealant that'll stick to the latex coating, it will work, but in 4 years you're going to have to patch it, and in 6 years, whatever you made, you're going to have to throw away. But if you're just looking for something for a couple years for a display, it'll work fine. It's super cheap. You can, if you want to, seal the whole thing in silicone. You can go buy a tube of it, crack it open, just slather the crap on with a putty knife and give it time to dry. But when you do large sheets of silicone, it doesn't cure the same way as a bead does. And that seems a little bit weird, but it doesn't. You end up with this large film that you can kind of forcibly rub off when you can't rub off the beads. It is an option. It's just really hard to get a nice, clean surface with that. You're going to end up with fish poop stuck to it. You're going to end up with algae growing off of weird things. If you use some kind of a treatment like methylene blue or the green copper treatments, I don't even remember what those are called because they're a terrible idea almost always. These things discolor silicone, so if your entire tank is made of silicone, it's going to end up screwing things up. So the last thing you really have as an option is tiling. And, if you want to do a wood tank and you want to tile it, they sell these concrete boards over by the drywall in most hardware stores. I don't remember exactly what it's called. They're 3-foot by 6-foot sheets. You just cut them to fit, you screw it in, you put on your mortar, slap your tiles on, grout it up, you're good to go. If you're worried about sticking, there are, gallon jugs of enzyme mix that you can use instead of water that really strengthens the grout in the mortar a lot. AccuColor EFX makes a grout that is an epoxy-based grout instead of a water base, so it won't affect water chemistry or anything else in any way. It'll last forever. It'll guaranteed waterproof your stuff. If you look at the Philippines, Taiwan, places like that, there's a lot of people that do catfish farming and stuff for food. And that's what they do. They'll do just, big cinder block tanks. They'll tile them for waterproofing. It's good to go. So that's an option. That's really the only other thing that I can think of that conceivably could work. I hope that this has been a little bit informative. I know this has been a really long video. I don't like to tell people what to use because there's no one option. I just... there's opinion and then there's fact. And people use Pond Shield a lot because Pond Shield openly says, this is great for fish. And it is. I mean, they're not lying about that, but it's not the best. And when I say it's not the best, that's not my opinion, that's a scientific fact. For what we are doing, polyamides are better. And, if you want something that's a quick cure, if you want something that is thick and you only have to put it on once, Novatuff 450, Aquapoxy 250 HD, both of these will work. They're low volatile solvents. You can do them inside. They'll be done in a day. Throw in your window. By the time the window is done curing, your epoxy is guaranteed to be done and you're good to go. And these have all of the benefits of the polyamides, and they have all of the benefits of the cycloaliphatic, and none of the downsides of either of them. They're just tremendously good products, and I'm probably going to end up going with the Aquapoxy 250 HD. It's one of the few companies that the owner has said, yes, use this. I reached out to them, and I got a response back from one of the Edisons themselves saying, use this. This will be great for what you're doing. We'll stand behind it. And that's something that you don't hear very often. That's not why I'm choosing it. I'm choosing it because it genuinely is the best of the best of the best options. But, you know, I'm not 100% sure yet, so I still might go with one of the cycloaliphatics like the Corotech V430. It's enough people have success with Pond Shield that I feel like it's probably okay. And Pond Shield, you know, it's a good product. It absolutely is, but it's not better than any of the other cycloaliphatics. And when I say it's not better, I don't mean like Oreos aren't better than Dollar Tree generic cookies, because Dollar Tree generic cookies taste like shit, and everybody knows it. But when you have an epoxy, there's two things that you're really worried about. You have the resin and you have the hardener, and the resin will, you know, it'll take your chemical resistance and it'll move it up or down a little bit for something. You take your flexibility, it'll move it, you know, a little more flexible, a little less flexible, but it doesn't affect it a whole lot, no matter what you really choose. I mean, there's some things where you choose the wrong epoxy and you put the wrong hardener in and they start smoking and catch on fire, and it's horrific. But the isophore and diamine is really the only thing that matters, and that's what takes your resin and converts it into the long, stringy chains of, you know, semicircular amines that bond together. It's kind of, you know, it creates kind of like a chainmail link, and that's where the strength comes from. With the polyamides, the strength comes from the fact that it converts your resin into these really long, fatty chains that get all tangled up, and you end up with like a big woolen blanket that's all tangled together and you can't punch through it. Whereas, you know, the other ones, they're just straight lines that they crack, they fall apart, they're not really bound together. So that's the strength of these two, is that they're really complex molecules that are all tangled together and bunched up, and there's not a big difference between them. As far as in things, there's not going to be a big difference between the Corotech V430 and the Pond Shield. If you want to go with Pond Shield because Pond Armor says, we guarantee it works, go ahead. You know, Corotech says, don't use this. But the Corotech stuff is $150 a gallon cheaper, and it's going to be exactly the same once it's applied. If you're not worried about the odors, if you're not worried about the curing time, the Corotech V400 I absolutely recommend. The company will not back me in doing that, but it is a wonderful product. It comes in a really nice crystal clear. It's tintable to basically any color you can imagine. They've got these metal flakes you can mix in to get this cool lava effect, where a lot of other places end up being like $1,200 for the lava effect epoxies. The little powder box is $40, and it does like 6 gallons of the effect. It's a really good product as long as you're able to do it someplace that's well ventilated, and as long as you're not in a hurry. Sherwin-Williams Macropoxy 646, also a very good product for this. If you're doing it, you know, wintertime, shed, or a garage that's well ventilated or something, you need something that is cold tolerable. Sureplate 235 is about the best that I can suggest, and that's another Sherwin-Williams thing. But that's the only time that I would use that, because it's just horrifically bad odor. It's dangerous. But those are really the only recommendations that I can make. You know, if you go down to a paint store, obviously it's not going to work with Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's, but an actual paint store, not just a Benjamin Moore or Sherwin-Williams. If you live someplace and you've got, you know, the local place here is Ockets, and they're pretty nice. They'll look it up for you. You go down and you say, you know, I'm looking for a high solids polyamide, or I'm looking for a cycloaliphatic amine epoxy. They'll help you find what you need. They won't necessarily know if it's waterproof or not. They'll be pretty uncertain about that. But either of those, pretty much any product will work. The only thing that you have to watch out for is cure time, pot time, which is the amount of time that you have to work with it before the bucket hardens, and volatile organic compounds. So even if it says low VOC, there's a good chance it's going to gag you. But the stuff that cures in a day the stuff that you can walk on within 12 hours and it's, you know, full cure 36 hours, that stuff's almost always perfectly fine for indoor use as long as it's either a polyamide or a cycloaliphatic. So I hope that's something that you can use. I hope I didn't just, you know, waste an hour of your day. I'm hoping to have some more interesting projects and things coming up pretty soon. I'm in the process of getting some brazing rods for making some aluminum tank stands and things. I think that'll be kind of a cool project to show you guys. I'm still working on my large PVC hybrid canister sump experiment. I'm waiting on a couple parts to come in for that. They've been back ordered for like a month, but they're $6 online and $38 at the hardware store. So I'm gonna wait. But you know, if you have any suggestions for anything, if you have any comments, let me know, and we'll see you guys next time.